All right, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the entire LAM Foundation, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this year's final session. Hard to believe, but we are in December, looking at the final session in our LAMposium in Your Living Room series. My name is Charlene Dunn. I am the Patient Outreach Coordinator for the Foundation. And again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your fantastic level of engagement throughout this entire series. As many of you know, these educational sessions evolved from the schedule of speakers that we had prepared originally for LAMposium last spring. You can learn more about this series and view recordings of previous sessions by visiting the LAMposium in Your Living Room landing page on the Foundation's website. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors, the Dater Foundation, Pfizer, and NDRI, the National Disease Research Interchange, for their support of this educational series. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Microphones and chat will be muted throughout Dr. Gupta's presentation. We will open the chat box for the Q&A. Once it is open, if you would, please type your questions in the chat box, and our moderator will then read your questions to Dr. Gupta. During the time that the chat box is open, we do ask that you limit your use of the chat box to questions only. We will have ample time for chat and well wishes later in the evening. Following the Q&A, we will move right into the patient and family group discussion. If you haven't yet had the chance to join one of these discussions, I do encourage you to do so this evening. It's a relaxed and comfortable way to connect and share with LAM patients and family members and some of our investigators from around the globe. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Patty Babian-Aronoff, our LAM liaison for Region 4 and our moderator this evening. I learned something about Patty when I was talking to her over the past few days, and I'd like to share this with you. I think we all know that as LAM patients, we tend to remember the details surrounding our diagnosis of LAM. In Patty's case, the day she heard from her doctor that there was, quote, something weird going on with her lungs was the very same day in 2012 that Patty was becoming an American citizen. This is a combination I hadn't heard before. And it was just 1 week later that Patty learned that something weird was LAM. She went on to attend her first LAMposium in spring 2013, where she had an engaging conversation with our CEO, Sue Sherman. Following that conversation, Patty dove right in and has now been our LAM liaison in Region 4 for over 7 years. For those of you not familiar, Region 4 covers Eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Patty is also an active member on the Foundation's Board of Directors, serving as secretary in addition. Like all of us, there is much more to Patty than a diagnosis of LAM. She is now in her 31st year with Merck Pharmaceutical, which happens to be one of the companies working diligently toward a vaccine for COVID-19. Outside of work and her involvement with the Foundation, she enjoys traveling, especially to her home country of France. Patty is also a connoisseur of theater and art, especially Impressionism, and she is looking forward to delving more deeply into those passions when she transitions to her post-Merck life. Patty, it is a pleasure having you with us this evening. Thank you for moderating, and I will now turn it over to you.
Hey, all right, can everybody hear me? It's okay, all right. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all the faces. So thank you, Shar, for this wonderful introduction. And as she said, as soon as I found out that I was diagnosed with LAM, I got involved with the LAM Foundation, which is, has been amazing. And also, I got involved with, the LAM Clinic here at the University of Pennsylvania, and setting up a lot of education meetings with Dr. Mariel Crater and also Vera Krikskaya, who's a LAM researcher. So it's the network of LAM Clinic is really an important topic, and it is the topic tonight, title being how to best integrate the LAM Clinic Network. So before I introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Nishant Gupta, he has a very very long and impressive bio, which I will be sharing with you soon. I just want to say how grateful we are to have Dr. Gupta involved with the LAM Foundation. He is really very caring of the LAM patients, and that's just something that we are grateful. And everyone who's been involved with him can tell you how much he cares about the patient. So Dr. Nishant Gupta completed his medical school training in India, followed by a residency in internal medicine at the University of Tennessee, and a fellowship in the field of pulmonary and critical care medicine at the University of Cincinnati. In addition, he has completed fellowship training in the field of rare lung diseases, as well as a master's degree in clinical and translational research at the University of Cincinnati. Dr. Gupta is currently an associate professor in the Division of Pulmonary, Critical Care, and Sleep Medicine at the University of Cincinnati, where he serves as the director of the Interstitial and Rare Lung Disease Program. Dr. Gupta is also the medical director of the International LAM and Rare Diseases Clinic Network. His clinical and research focus is on the field of rare lung diseases such as LAM, and his work is aimed at better defining the natural history, improving detection, and developing novel treatment modalities and monitoring strategies for LAM patients. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nishant Gupta.
Okay, I think it's unmuted. Thank you very much, Patty. This was a very generous introduction. It's my pleasure to be here and torture everyone for the next few minutes. And let me see, let me share the screen. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So the topic of tonight's talk is how to best integrate the LAM Clinic Network in your care. And as part of that, in the next few minutes, I think this is the brief agenda, is that I'll provide a high-level overview of the clinic network. I'll highlight how this network has been vital to the success of LAM. I'll give you a bit of a sneak peek into some behind-the-scene activities that happen to ensure that you continue to get the best possible care. Perhaps most importantly, what I'll spend most of my time on is to discuss some strategies that you could employ to get the most benefit out of your clinic visits and highlight some of the resources available to you for your care. We should have ample time for questions. And by the way, questions need not be limited to the content that we discuss. Any and all digressions and scenic routes are more than welcome. Speaking of digressions, let's just begin with a digression that has been this wonderful year. I don't need to really go over this slide deck. You can see these are just some numbers and pictures showing the pandemic. Just a couple of brief slides about COVID-19 before we delve into the clinic network. So this is, everyone on this call is aware that COVID-19 is widespread in the US, and we are at the worst situation that we have been with COVID-19 ever since it came into being. I do, however, want to say that there is light at the end of this tunnel. This winter seems to be the toughest phase, but I think as the winter gets over and we start looking at spring months, there is a lot of hope and optimism that things will continue to get better beyond that. Something that a lot of patients ask is what is the experience with LAM patients who have acquired COVID-19 so far? Between our clinics and other conversations around the world, I'm aware of probably about 15 or so patients with LAM who have acquired COVID-19 so far. And all of the patients that I'm aware of have all recovered well. The next point is something we have discussed before on previous talks, but it's worth reiterating, that you should, with regards to sirolimus decision making, you should keep things simple and make decisions solely based on LAM and not COVID-19. What I mean by that is, if you need to be on sirolimus for treatment of LAM, continue to be on it and do not halt it or stop it because of the fear of acquiring COVID. On the flip side, if you are not on sirolimus, then the perception that sirolimus might help prevent COVID-19 should not be the reason you go on sirolimus. That decision to start should be based on LAM. And if you're not aware, there is a COVID-19 page at the Foundation's website. I've provided the link here, where we periodically update as new information evolves. So stay tuned for that. And I figured this is something probably on everyone's mind, so worth spending a couple of minutes on COVID-19 vaccine. So on the top here, this is really a view of what the coronavirus looks like, and you see these sort of crowns or the spikes at the surface, which are widely perceived or believed to be the antigens that give it the major potential for harm. And this cartoon shows the various components of the virus that we don't need to delve into, but I just wanted to mention the spike protein is what most, or I should say all vaccine candidates are targeting. And in the diagram below is sort of a very quick schematic of the vaccines being produced. So in general, if you take a step back and think of what a vaccine is supposed to do, really all we are trying to do is get the antigen into your cells so that your cells recognize it and generate an immune response against it. The idea being that once you have generated an immune response against that antigen, if you have the infection, your system is primed to the antigen and is ready to wake up and fight it. And there are many ways of doing it. The simplest way is to give you a weakened form of the virus and let your immune system take over. That obviously has concerns given this is a novel pathogen, and also for patients who are immune suppressed, whether they might get disease from the weakened virus itself. The way the vaccines for COVID-19 currently are made is that none of the virus is using a live pathogen. So the two vaccine candidates that are leading this race are the ones from Pfizer and Moderna, and both of them employ an mRNA technology. mRNA is really messenger RNA. By messenger, what I mean is that this RNA tells your cells to do certain things. So it carries the message for them to do things. And what this vaccine is that the scientists have generated an mRNA sequence that tells the cells to produce the spike protein. So that mRNA sequence is coated in a lipid coating and is given to you in the form of a vaccine. This mRNA then tells your cells to produce this spike protein. And when your cells produce the spike protein, your body recognizes it as foreign and develops antibodies against it and forms the immune response that makes you immune for or protective for future infections. And the second way this vaccine is developed is being developed is the Oxford or the AstraZeneca vaccine, for example, which is a viral vector vaccine. In this vaccine, the spike protein of the coronavirus is inserted into a harmless chimpanzee virus, which has been genetically engineered. And as that chimpanzee virus is injected and enters the human cells, your body's immune system recognizes the spike protein and forms antibodies against it. This was just a sort of a brief high-level overview of the current vaccine candidates. Again, just to reiterate that these are all candidates against only the spike protein and not the whole virus. So these vaccines cannot give you COVID-19. Where we stand on this right now is that the complete safety data has not been published in the medical journals yet, but to the best of our knowledge, it generally appears to be safe. FDA is going to review this data for Pfizer on the 10th of December, and for Moderna, I think the 17th of December. At least that's where things stood the last time I checked the news. And it is widely expected that they will issue an emergency use authorization relatively soon after. In plain language, which means is that that is the step that then enables the vaccine to be out and about. In general, it is good to get vaccinated for this as soon as possible. Again, none of these vaccines are live vaccines, so you can take it regardless of whether you're on sirolimus or everolimus or not. How the vaccine will roll out and what order and when, there is not absolute clarity on that. What seems to be the most logical order is that frontline healthcare workers will probably be the first ones to receive it, followed immediately afterwards by people living in nursing homes and congregate living situations, and followed next by high-risk individuals, which is where I think the LAM patients would belong. We are closely following all of these developments. Again, stay tuned, keep checking the COVID-19 update. We will keep you updated as and when we get more information on it. And just one last thing, getting a vaccine is not a substitute for social distancing, mask wearing, and hand hygiene. And last but not the least, here's the web link for CDC's page for the COVID-19 vaccine, which has a lot of other helpful information and FAQs for you. I'll stop talking about COVID at this point in time, but as I said, in the Q&As, if there are more questions about this, happy to talk about it in more detail. So coming back to our main road of the LAM Clinic Network. So simply put, what is the LAM Clinic Network? It essentially is a confederacy of clinics across the world, which is led by providers with an academic interest in LAM and also in other rare lung diseases. The major mission for this clinic network is rather simple. We want to provide high quality care for all the LAM patients. Other missions are, we want to promote multidisciplinary expertise to cover all facets of LAM. We want this network to be the hub for collaborative research to get you the latest advances in LAM. And lastly, this is another mission is to educate other providers about the disease, to raise awareness and help alleviate the delay in diagnosis problem that is common to LAM and really all rare diseases. And so some of you may have seen this sort of a tripartite mission, which is common to a lot of academic endeavors, and the LAM Clinic Network is no different, where we want it to be the center of patient care, research, and education. So how many clinics are a part of the network? Currently, we have 36 clinics in the United States and 28 international clinics. I haven't listed the individual clinic names and clinic directors here just for the sake of time, but the link at the bottom of this slide can take you to the foundation page where you could look up that information easily. So let's touch on each of these aspects of the clinical care, research, and education. Let's start with clinical care. And again, I'm going to focus on what you can do in order to get the maximum benefit from these clinics for your clinical care. And really, here I want to start with things that you should start thinking about even before you reach the clinic. So as you're thinking about scheduling your visit, some things to think ahead of time is, do you need to see just your pulmonologist, or do you need to see other providers? For example, do you need to also see a nephrologist for your angiomyolipoma? Or if you have TSC, do you need to see other TSC providers? Are they all located at the same time? Is it possible that the visits can be coordinated so you can see everyone in, if possible, a one-stop shop model? Do you need other testing? And most important, perhaps, being lung function tests or 6-minute walk tests. And again, can these be coordinated to happen simultaneously with the clinic? The advantage there being that in addition to the convenience of getting it done in one go, you could have the lung function tests being discussed, the results discussed real time with your physician. On PFT testing, remember to ask what medications you need to hold prior to testing and at what time frames. And this is especially important for patients who are on bronchodilators. And also ask about bronchodilator use prior to the test. This is important because for LAM patients, we generally like to see a post-bronchodilator value. Oftentimes labs by protocol just use a pre-bronchodilator test, and that makes it difficult to compare values from one test to the other. Other scheduling considerations: do you need labs? Do they need to be fasting? For example, sometimes you may need to have fasting lipid profiles done. Do they need to be timed? For example, a sirolimus trough level needs to be drawn 4 hours either side of your of the time that you take your drug. Do you need any other testing? For example, CT scans. And last but not the least, if you're anything like me, that's the first thing you think about. Will I have time for food? Do I need to bring a snack? One last thing, this is important. Do not ever assume that your outside records either have been or will be sent to your LAM clinic without hiccups. As much as we would like to believe that our technology and systems communicate with each other, this is something that often falls through the cracks. And even if some institutions share the same electronic medical record, some critical information just doesn't transmit automatically. And two perfect examples for that are lung function tests. Often what gets transmitted or what gets seen at the other institution is just the interpretation or the report of the lung function test. And frankly, that interpretation is probably the least helpful part of that entire test, because what we want to see is the raw numbers. And those raw numbers often don't transmit. I tell patients that when you have had a PFT, just ask them, can I just get a copy of my PFT so you have it with you? And the same with CT scan images. What gets transmitted across the EMRs is an interpretation of the CT, but not the actual image. So call ahead of time to make sure that all these things have truly reached your clinic and that no extra buttons need to be pushed to make it happen. Your LAM provider will not know if a test was done outside their institution unless you have informed them about it. And as much as we give information to the outside labs to fax things to the LAM clinics, these things often get missed. NIH records also, they require a specific release form, and images need to be requested separately, and you need to allot some time for that to happen. In general, it's a good idea if you can get in the habit of keeping a copy of your records with you as a safekeeping to avoid these hassles. And this is not meant to say that there are just problems here. This is just something to highlight that you should not assume that these things will happen smoothly. So worth checking in a few days before your visit to make sure this has happened. Some things to keep in mind during the visit. Always remember to bring a current medication list. And include any and all over-the-counter products and supplements that you might be taking. Um, Often a good idea to click a picture of your supplemental product ingredients or bring the actual bottle with you. And this is especially important if you're on sirolimus. That way we can check for any potential drug-drug interactions. It's a good idea if you can write down the questions or things that you want to discuss during the visit. And that's because it helps you prioritize and focus on the things that you want to cover. Most providers prefer having a written list of questions. That way they know the things that are on your mind. And last but not the least, that way you don't forget things. And if you're like me, once you leave the visit and you're driving home, you think of 5 other things that you should have asked. But if you've written down, that helps avoid that. If there is a major change in your health, there are major questions that you want to discuss. May even be helpful to send these to your LAM provider in advance, so that they know what you want to discuss, but also gives them the time to prepare for that if need be. Also, it's a good idea to summarize the key action items at the end, or like I used like to call at the end of the visit, what is your homework and what is my homework. And also, before you leave, formulate a communication and monitoring plan. For example, what is the method of communication that works best for you and your LAM provider? Is it an email? Is it a MyChart message? Is it a phone call? Whatever it is, but best if you agree upon that before you leave the visit. Same goes with monitoring plans. Have clarity on roughly how often you need to have PFTs, how often you need to have blood work. What is the plan for communication if you are sick? An action plan for pneumothorax. Just the general idea being that the more prepared you are about all of these things up front, the better it is going forward and avoids confusion down the road. Also, don't forget to ask about other health maintenance stuff. And this is easy to forget because all of the focus from both a patient and a provider perspective is really on LAM. And we often forget to think about the other stuff. And perhaps the most important here is vaccinations. I forgot to put the link here, but there is a whole vaccination guide on the LAM Foundation's website that you should take a look at. That will walk you through what all vaccinations you need if you're not on mTOR inhibitors versus if you're on mTOR inhibitors. In general, you should get a flu shot every year. You should get both kinds of pneumonia vaccines. And if you are older than 50, you should get the shingles vaccine, whether you're on mTOR inhibitors or not. And if you're on mTOR inhibitors, then you should get the shingles vaccine regardless of your age. And the shingles vaccine that you need to take is the Shingrix, not Zostavax, because Zostavax is a live vaccine. And lastly, let your LAM provider know about other physicians that you may want to send a copy of your clinic notes or updates so that they can keep your entire team informed. Now, there are different care models that different LAM patients employ, and that is all really dependent upon the extent of your disease and what your needs are and your access. There is really no one right answer to this. This is a table that shows some of the common care models. This certainly doesn't include all models. So first care model is that all your management is done at a LAM clinic, and this is perhaps most relevant for patients who live in close proximity to a LAM clinic, where it's easy for them to go for all their visits. Or patients who have severe disease or progressive disease that really requires very close monitoring, or patients who have complex multi-system disease that is best handled by an expert. Perhaps the more common model is where you alternate with a local physician, which is a good middle ground approach that ensures that you're closely monitored and while also balancing the ordeals of travel at the same time. And for example, you have a LAM clinician and a local pulmonologist, and you see your LAM clinician at every 6 months and your local provider every 6 months as well, but you alternate. That way you get to see a pulmonologist every 3 months. And this model is perhaps most helpful if you're newly diagnosed, so that we can keep a close eye on your disease progression, or you have newly started sirolimus. That way we can keep a close eye on your side effects and treatment response. The third model is where you have most of your care done at a local clinic, but you have an annual check-in with a LAM clinic. And this is perhaps most relevant for patients who have a stable disease, and this may be stable, mild disease of sirolimus, or you have stable disease, you're on sirolimus, but it's been a while and we have ensured that you're on a stable trajectory to where you can get most of your monitoring done on cruise control at a local level. And sometimes this model is needed if you have significant access limitations. Of course, we in LAM have the luxury of having the NIH program, where a lot of times the insurance issues that are relevant for the LAM clinic access are not necessarily relevant, and you have access to world-class care and research opportunities. But it may also be helpful to have a local care team who's familiar with LAM in addition to your NIH visit, so that you are you have an existing established relationship with someone in case of emergencies or you need help locally, and also in case there are research studies that may not be available by at NIH. This is a very simple table that one of the faculty members here at UC had written about the typical monitoring schedule for LAM patients on sirolimus. This is not a one-size-fits-all, but this is just a general guide. And the idea here being that you at baseline establish a diagnosis, get a good idea of what your lung function is, what your baseline labs are before you start drug, what your CT scan looks like. And after you start the drug, perhaps get safety labs once a month for the first 3 months. And if everything is okay, you space them out to every 3 months for the first year and then every 6 months thereafter. And the same schedule could be followed for spirometry, where you get it done roughly every 3 months for the first year and then space them out to every 6 months. And lung volumes and diffusion could be done alternately, perhaps every 6 months the first year and then every year thereafter. Again, we don't need to strictly adhere to the schedule for every patient, but this is a good, helpful general guide to follow. And speaking of access issues, and really one of the few good things to come out of the whole COVID-19 pandemic is the mainstream adoption of telehealth, which is really been very helpful in that it has eased the burden of travel for a number of LAM patients and provided them more easy access to the clinic network. And time will tell, but I don't envision telehealth taking a step back even after all is said and done with the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So it's easy to envision a collaborative care model where, majority or all of your testing can be done locally, and you have a periodic telehealth check with your LAM provider to make sure everything is okay. And one word of caution, though, that be mindful of local, state, and institutional rules around telehealth. And this is really not something that patients need to know about, but something that institutions and providers have to grapple with. There is no real clarity on these rules, but every institution interprets these laws differently, and they make their rules. For example, some institutions would say that you cannot have a telehealth visit with someone who is out of state. So just be mindful of that and be aware of what your local clinic's rules are regarding this. And some of this would be an evolving situation with time. Well, since we started with a digression, let me take a little bit of a digression again here. Since we were talking of telehealth, something else that we are working on here is really trying to understand where home spirometry comes in with remote monitoring and telehealth in LAM patients. So as all of you know, that longitudinal monitoring of FEV1 is the cornerstone of management in LAM. And with the advancement in technology, we now have multiple.
Have your microphone. All microphones. Thank you.
What time is it? So I'm afraid to put her down so early.
Okay, so we now have multiple devices that are available that can allow routine measurement of FEV1 at home. And this has really helped us to safely navigate COVID-19 in clinical trials. And we are hopeful that it may even provide estimates of disease trajectory faster than we get in an office-based setting. And we are currently studying this as part of the MILD trial that I'll get to in a few minutes. So just a hypothetical example of the real life problem we are trying to address. So let's say that this is not uncommon for a LAM patient for us to have this trajectory. So a LAM patient comes in at baseline, their FEV1 is 2.5 liters. At 3 months, it has dropped down to 2.45. But these are just 2 tests. We don't know where they are headed. We get a test at 6 months and it is the same. And then we say, okay, we'll get a test again in a few months. And a year later, it is 2.40. And now you have decided that this is 100 cc's per year decline, which is too much, and that we need to start someone on treatment. But if you think about it, if we had a lot of data points here in the first 3 months, we could have perhaps reached the same conclusion at the 3-month mark and have avoided this 9 months of unchecked disease activity. And this is where we think home spirometry might help make these treatment decisions sooner than what we are making now. And to give you an example, this is a patient who was enrolled in MILD, and this is a graph of the lung function tests done by home spirometry on this patient. And as you can see that this patient had a continued downward decline in lung function, and to the point where it met withdrawal criteria roughly 6 months into the study. But if you examine this trajectory, this trajectory was clear really 3 to 4 months into the course. So potentially helping us make this decision sooner than when it was eventually made. And this is the same patient. I won't go into the details of the stats here, but the rate of decline as calculated on home spirometry was roughly 14 mLs every week. And on office testing was very similar, 13 ml per week. But the value of the data points, of the added data points here, is that on home spiro, this is statistically significant, whereas versus office pyro, we would still not be able to call this a statistically significant decline. And these are just two real life examples where we had patients who could not get office-based spirometry because of the limitations posed by COVID-19. And that is an anxiety-provoking situation for both the patients and the providers, where we don't know how safely one of our study subjects is. But having the ability to look at their home spirometry data, and when you see these stable or even improving trends, it gives us a lot of comfort that we know that the patients are safe and that they are getting monitored. Having said all of that, there are still a lot of things that need to be worked on for home spirometry. Just a few things. Absolute values on home spirometry are not the same as office-based PFTs. Home spirometry values are consistently lower than office-based values. And so in case any of you are using it, don't get discouraged or try to compare what your absolute value on a home test is with an office test. We don't know what the optimal frequency of testing is. For most LAM patients, it's a slow-moving disease to where even once a week should be good enough. My personal preference so far, after looking at a lot of these things for mild end result, is that perhaps starting off maybe twice weekly for the first 3 months and then going to once a week. But we are currently studying this. How do you ensure consistency in testing? And that's most relevant for bronchodilator use, right? What we don't want is some tests being done with the bronchodilator, some done without a bronchodilator. What is the best population to make use of home spirometry? It makes sense to me that the most helpful would be patients who are newly diagnosed and we are trying to study where the disease is headed. Patients who have just started sirolimus and we want to know if sirolimus is stabilizing disease, or at each dose change of sirolimus. And I'm already convinced that I think it's very helpful in clinical trial monitoring. Other issues to be waded through are insurance coverage for devices, and monitoring and interpretation time that may be needed for your providers. Is that reimbursable or not? And will it add to more time constraints at the provider level? And speaking of time constraints, I think it's worth mentioning that the LAM clinics, the majority of the LAM clinics are based at major academic health centers, and the LAM clinic directors are often some of the best physicians at the institute. So these are folks who are in demand, not just for LAM, but have a lot of other responsibilities. And some of those include taking care of other rare lung disease patients or more common pulmonary patients. A lot of the providers also have critical care responsibilities where they are staffing the ICUs and the floors. They have other research commitments. They may be at positions in their university where they have administrative responsibilities. A lot of these places have residents and fellows so we have teaching obligations. These are in-demand people who travel a lot. And of course, this year, your LAM clinic directors are getting pulled all over the place to help with COVID-19. And I just wanted to highlight this, that, all of us like to take care of LAM patients, but just to point out that there are other directions that your clinic directors are getting pulled in. So keep that in mind with regards to expectations of response times with regards to questions. And let's say that, we have taken care of all of these models and telehealth, and it is still, for whatever reason, whether it be insurance or access or travel, it is just not possible for you to go to a LAM clinic. Even in that situation, think things that you could do to help are, number one, be aware of the most common management aspects of LAM you're yourself. And also know what resources are available to you and how you can access them, not only for yourself, but also for your local physicians. And some of the common things that you should be aware of are what are the signs and symptoms of pneumothorax, and what you need to do in case you have symptoms of pneumothorax, and how a pneumothorax needs to be managed. You should know the importance of regular lung function test monitoring. You should know sirolimus dosing. You should know the common adverse effects of sirolimus. And in the interest of time, I won't go into all of these, but in the Q&A session, I'm happy to come back to any and all of these and talk about this. And you should know about at least the common research opportunities that are available to you, with also the knowledge that a lot of these research trials offer travel support. And last but not the least, you can always reach out to the staff at the LAM Foundation, or me really, or any or all of us at any point in time with questions. If talking to you gets me out of the meeting, any meeting, I will gladly take that. So don't hesitate in reaching out with questions. In terms of resources, perhaps the most important resource is, and your first stop should be the LAM Foundation's website. And this is something that the staff at the foundation has really very carefully and meticulously put forward, thinking of every possible scenario that commonly comes up. For example, this is a very quick, a very short card with a QR code that you can carry in your pocket. And if you're in the emergency room for a pneumothorax or any other acute issue, all you have to do is take this card out and have your ER physician scan it, and they have quick, ready tips for all they need to know about LAM. I've highlighted just a few other things on the website that I think are helpful. There is a specific section that mentions the currently open clinical trials in LAM. Perhaps the most helpful resource is the LAM handbook, which is just a amazingly detailed compendium of all the common things that you need to know about. And then there is an overview on LAM for mostly geared towards newly diagnosed patients, but I think it's really helpful for anyone. Following the patient benefit conference, there was the creation of a wellness portal, which has a ton of useful videos and resources. You are, of course, aware of all the educational webinars that are held periodically by the foundation, including, for example, the LAMposium in Your Living Room series. You have access to publications such as Currents and Journeys, and I don't know how and why that link is not here, but yeah. And there's the Circle of Hope Transplant Program, which is headed by Dan Dilling and Charlene. And of course, you guys are aware of LAMIs and the LAMposium educational events whenever we get back to, again, being together in person. And as far as resources for your local providers, if you want to give them one resource, perhaps the most important documents to give them are the LAM guidelines. I've provided a link here where you can download the guidelines for free, and your providers can access for free from the foundation's website. And on the right-hand side is really the major points of the guidelines, which is that sirolimus is the first-line treatment of LAM in patients with abnormal lung function, patients with substantial disease burden, patients who have a rapid decline in lung function, or patients who have problematic chylous or lymphatic complications. Other highlights of the guidelines are to I don't know how that happened, is to not use hormonal therapy on a routine basis or use doxycycline, and that VEGF-D is helpful for diagnosis and can help you avoid the need for a biopsy. That CT scan findings of cystic lung disease are generally not sufficient to make a confirmed diagnosis of LAM. And you should consider a transbronchial biopsy before a surgical biopsy. If you have a pneumothorax, you should perform a pleurodesis sooner rather than later. And that prior pleurodesis is not a contraindication for future transplant. And in addition, there are really very helpful algorithms to guide your providers for a step-by-step diagnosis and management of LAM. Moving on from clinical care, let's touch on the other aspect of the clinic network, which is research. And really this clinic network acts as a multi-site consortium that has facilitated multi-center trials in LAM. For example, the MILES trial that gave us sirolimus was conducted by using this network of clinics. And this network has formed the construct and or the recruitment source for many other LAM trials. And it is perhaps the only way to conduct large-scale trials in rare diseases. And you should be proud to know that not only LAM, this LAM Clinic Network has now been tapped into by a number of other rare lung diseases, and it is helping advance the cause of rare lung diseases across the board. And this is just a table showing some other rare lung diseases and just highlighting the value of this consortium of clinics where you can have a number of these patients that can organize and form a critical mass and allow meaningful progress to happen. Speaking of research, let me take another brief digression and make a plea for MILD. And so let's take a step back. So what we know about sirolimus and LAM from the MILES trial is that patients who had their lung function less than 70%, if given sirolimus, they can have stabilization in their decline of lung function. The unanswered question for the field is, what if we can start giving you sirolimus before your lung function is abnormal? And can we preserve future lung function decline by using this strategy? And that is the next most important question immediately facing us in LAM. And that is the exact question that the MILD trial is trying to address. And so it's a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial where patients with FEV1 greater than 70% are randomized to either placebo or low-dose sirolimus 1 milligram daily to try to answer this question. There are 10 sites across the US. I'll go over them on the next slide. All travel costs for MILD are covered under the study. More information for this study is available at the Foundation's website and clinicaltrials.gov. And I'd urge any patient who has an FEV1 greater than 70%, and if you're not on sirolimus, please seriously consider participating in MILD. And you can reach out to me or Frank McCormack or Susan McMahon. Susan's email is here, and we'll be happy to answer any questions and walk through the study with you individually. And these are the sites for MILD. As you can see that we have 10 sites across the country, mostly located in high population density areas. Some questions that come up is, can you enroll in MILD and also participate in NIH visits? Yes, absolutely, you could do that. Also, with the impact of COVID-19, we have had to adapt, and we have laxed that a lot of the MILD visits, especially the in-between visits, can be done remotely with local labs and local PFTs with phone or video telehealth visits. And as part of MILD, since we are studying home spirometry, you'll get access to a home spirometer. Yeah, I think I'll stop here for MILD, but just a plea to think about it. This clinic networks also form the basis for MIDAS. MIDAS, for patients who are not aware, is a natural history study where we are trying to collect long-term data on LAM patients, not only to address the natural history question, but also to understand the long-term safety and efficacy of sirolimus. And currently, MIDAS is being driven by clinic directors and research coordinators. However, that model is really not sustainable for the length of time that we would like for MIDAS and this data collection to continue. So, it is not hard to imagine a future where we think that patients will have direct access to the study database. Patients will have direct access to their own data, and you can enter the data in the database and help us carry Midas forward in perpetuity. And this is perhaps the only way to sustain the study indefinitely. And we've already made a lot of progress in this direction, and more information is going to come your way soon. But this is important not only for the question at hand, but also to help us design future trials more efficiently, because we will have a very good idea of uh, each individual's disease characteristics, and we can plan and design trials better. Now, coming to the third mission of the network, which is education. This is really a behind the scenes activities, because this is something that often the patients are not aware of. But as part of this network, we host quarterly conference calls with the clinic directors. And the agenda for the conference calls includes an educational case, which is often but not always LAM focused, but we are always talking about a rare lung disease. We provide updates from the LAM Foundation, as well as talk about all open current clinical trials in LAM. In addition, we meet in person with all the clinic directors at ATS. We produce white papers addressing common management aspects of LAM that we can use not only within the network, but also helps educate and manage patients outside of the network. And this also gives us a source to get input on curveballs. For example, just a few weeks ago, I had a question on the management of a LAM patient. I posed that question in an email to the clinic directors, and within a week, I had dozens of very helpful inputs, which was just great and was hugely helpful in managing that particular question. And last but not the least, this clinic network and the clinic directors also communicate with your local providers and are the primary teaching source regarding nuances of LAM management, which is helpful because that helps combat the delay in diagnosis problem for future LAM patients. And talking of white papers, the three most commonly widely used white papers are: we have a 2-page sirolimus prescribing guide that walks a provider through how to prescribe sirolimus, how to monitor sirolimus, things to watch out for. Similarly, we have a vaccination guide that we previously talked about. We have a pleural disease management guide. And we are currently working on a white paper on anesthesia considerations in LAM. And we'd welcome other ideas that you might have on creating more of these white papers for the network. This is not necessarily a clinic network thing, but on the topic of education, just wanted to point out that something else we have done for education is has just taken a step back and thought about what are the resources that people most commonly frequent. And so if you're a patient getting diagnosed with LAM, you're perhaps going to Google, and one of the most common sites that someone visits is Wikipedia. Similarly, if you're a clinician and you want to know about a topic, one of the first sites we visit is a site or a resource called UpToDate. And so we have carefully updated the content on the LAM Wikipedia page and also written the chapters of LAM on UpToDate. And it is really very heartening and reassuring to see the number of reads and number of hits that both of these resources get, which make us reassured that people are getting access to the most accurate and most up-to-date information on LAM. And in terms of clinic network and things that we need to improve, I won't spend too much time on this, considering I want to spend time on questions and answers, and see it's already 8 o'clock. So things we really need to improve are, we need to think about globalization and expansion of this network. The quality of care and provider engagement aspect, I think this is something that every clinic network mentions, because we always strive for perfection. But frankly, for this clinic network, I don't really think that is a major issue. Improved patient access comes up periodically, but more often than not, that is related to the fact that as the universities and academic centers become big behemoths, your clinic provider may not even know that you are trying to get in. Often the solution to this is a very simple notification to the provider that that someone needs to bypass the system. In terms of globalization, we want to expand the network to areas where we have the most potential to catch LAM patients. And these by default translate to areas with high population density. But we don't just want to open clinics to fill a dot on the map. I think there need to be certain ground rules for new clinics. And some of those ground rules should be that you have an enthusiastic and engaged clinic director who is willing to collaborate, who have the capability, the time to undertake scholarly or research endeavors, are willing to communicate best if they already have existing trial infrastructure, and best if they are based at a high population center. And if you think about it, this is a list of all the cities in the world which comprise of over 10 million people. And the red dots are where we have a LAM clinic in place. And so suffice to say, there is still a lot of work to be done to really ensure that LAM patients across the world are getting high quality care. And I don't think I need to spend time on the advantages and challenges of this expansion. I think it's self-explanatory that the more organized we are across the world, that the better opportunities we have for larger trials and making sure that every LAM patient gets the best possible care. So I'll just summarize with what I think are the take-home points for this talk is that the LAM Clinic Network is a very useful resource to ensure that you get high quality care, and it has formed the bedrock for scientific advancements in LAM by promoting research. We are lucky to have some of the world's best minds leading these clinics. So as much as possible, try and stay connected with the LAM clinic. Actively participate in research, and again a plea for mild, and be an active participant in your decision making. Try to have access to your records and keep copies with yourself. Come prepared to your clinic visits, best if with written questions. Voice all your questions and concerns to your clinic directors, don't hold them back. And we like to hear from you. If you have feedback on clinics, areas that we need to improve, ideas that you have for improvement or expansion, or anything really, we want to hear about it. And this last point, I actually didn't touch on it before, but if you know of providers in unrepresented areas, let us know. That gives us helpful leads into who else we could engage, even if they do not become a part of an official LAM clinic network. We know that there is someone who is familiar with LAM, and the next time we hear from a patient in or around the area, we can direct them to this person. Anyway, well, with that, I'll stop talking. I'll say thank you very much again for inviting me for this talk and for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I will start with a question that we had. How will it be decided which of the multiple vaccines LAM patient will receive? That's for COVID. Also, do you have concern, because it has already come out that people who receive a vaccine will feel sick afterward, even more so than with flu shot?
Yeah, Patty, let me tackle one question at a time, if I understand. And I'm not surprised that the question started with the COVID vaccine question. I fully expected that. And if I understood the first question correctly, we're asking which vaccine will the LAM patients get? Really, I think the answer should be whichever is available to you. They all seem to have similar efficacy and safety data so far. I think we'll have more clarity on it as these data get published. If you if the order of vaccines stays true to where it seems like it will be, I think we have some time to get more real life data on the tolerance of the vaccine, because I think the healthcare providers and nursing home residents are probably going to get this first. I don't know if that adequately answered the question or if there were other elements of this that I missed.
No, I think that's fine. And also the second part of the question, I'll reread that again. So do you have any concern, because it has already come out, that people who receive a vaccine will feel sick afterward, even more so than with the flu shots?
Yeah, this has been in the news where people say that they felt sick with a flu-like illness after they got the vaccine. Really, what is not known is what percentage of people who get the vaccine feel this way. So I'm not sure that that's a given, that is how you will feel. And unfortunately, that's all we have to go by are press releases and anecdotes that get published or come on the news. It would be helpful to actually take a look at the data to determine what were the percentages of patients who felt sick, how long they were sick. From most I hear is that this was, yes, this was a significant flu-like symptoms, but that they were short-lived for a day or so, and then you were able to go out and about with your usual life.
So another question which is related to, again, the vaccine, COVID vaccine. Once you get the vaccine, how long does it take for you to benefit from the vaccine or be immune? And why do you still have to wear a mask once vaccinated? Thanks.
Yeah, so most vaccines, at least the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines that are going to come out, are going to be 2-shot series where you need to take a second dose roughly a month after the first dose. And that second booster dose is important for you to be considered or have full efficacy for the vaccine. So one of the things that we need to be aware of is that just because you had a reaction or some symptoms from the first dose, that shouldn't deter us from taking the second dose, because that second dose is very important to get the maximum efficacy. How long after that would you get the benefit? I think relatively soon after, but after the booster dose, I mean.
Right. And then also, and why do you still have to wear a mask once vaccinated?
Yeah, so vaccine substantially reduces your chances of getting COVID-19. It likely will reduce the chances of you getting severe COVID-19, but the risk of acquiring disease will not go down to zero, even with vaccine. And that is why it's important to continue to carry on the same safety precautions. And the other thing is that for proper herd immunity to happen in the country, really a large proportion of the patients of the population needs to be vaccinated. And given the staggered rollout over the next few months, that is unlikely to happen in just the next few weeks. And that's why through the winter, spring at least, we need to continue the same precautions as we have been so far.
Thank you. Something else that's also in the line of the COVID. My friends who have had COVID don't think they need to get the vaccine. Is that correct?
Likely not. I think if you have the chance to get vaccine, I think you should err on the side of getting the vaccine. Although it's not common, reports of reinfection with COVID-19 have been published. So that is a possibility. And The parallel that I can give you is that even if you've had shingles before, we still say that you should take the shingles vaccine. And I think the same rule applies here.
Thank you. Still on COVID, when the states receive the COVID vaccine, will we more likely be notified by the LAM clinic or pulmonologist or primary care provider?
I don't know that there is one answer to it. I think the information could come from any or all of these sources, and I would probably add another source here, which is the foundation. All of us really, all of us are keeping a close eye on this. All healthcare providers are keeping a close eye on this. Each and every one of us is getting this question from one of our patients every single day. And so, but right now the distribution plans are just not available. But my guess is that you will hear from pretty much everyone.
Okay, let me get some questions that are away from the COVID. Is there a specific device list for home monitoring? So I'm sure I'm assuming it's got to do with like the monitoring of the breathing. So do we have a specific device list for home monitoring?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is no specific list, and I'm not sure that there is a one-size-fit-all thing that really fits for all LAM patients. You could probably think about having your own pulse oximeter in this list, perhaps. For example, that's probably the simplest thing that would fit the description of home monitoring. And the next thing that makes sense would be a home spirometer. And there are a number of home spirometers available in the market. The things with home spirometry, I think, as we discussed before, are that these devices range from being cheap, meaning $50 to $100 cheap, to expensive, meaning triple digits to 4-digit expensive. And each one of them has different capabilities. What all features are absolutely essential for your monitoring need to be figured out. There are a lot of other nuances for this that need to be determined. I think we'll have better idea of all of this once we are able to look at the home spirometry data that we are collecting now.
Thank you. Another question about sirolimus. Is it necessary to get a CT before starting sirolimus?
Not absolutely, and not in every patient. If you've had a CT scan relatively recently and you've had closed lung function monitoring and you qualify based on either abnormal lung function or a declining lung function, getting a CT scan will not necessarily alter that decision.
Another question on sirolimus. How often should a LAM patient on sirolimus get the pneumonia shot?
Yeah, if you are, well, whether you're on sirolimus or not, if you are a LAM patient and you have never had a pneumonia shot, then you need to start by taking the Prevnar or the PCV13, followed a year later by Pneumovax or the PPSV23. The Prevnar is a once in a life, one and done situation. Pneumovax has to be repeated every 5 years until you're 65. And after 65, you get Pneumovax once.
Thank you. Another question about vaccination. Just to be sure I heard correctly, if we're on sirolimus, we should get the shingle vaccine no matter what age we are.
Yes, because you're on sirolimus, you're at a higher risk for developing shingles. So you should take the shingles vaccine. And because you may be less than 50 and not automatically qualify for shingles vaccine, just keep in mind that if you simply walk into a local pharmacy, your pharmacist most likely will not be able to give you the vaccine. You may need an order from your healthcare provider to get the vaccine.
Thank you. A question about the white papers that you were referring to. a few people ask where are they located? Are they available on the foundation website? If not, where could we find them?
Yeah, I know that the vaccine paper is on the foundation's website. I'm not sure if the others are on the website or not. They, they were, I think they were really more geared towards a provider than the patient level, but there is really no reason why that can't be uploaded on the website. We can talk about that offline.
Okay. Now, a question about the LAM clinic from someone in Vancouver, Canada. We have Roland Nader as our LAM doctor, but don't have an actual clinic. I believe he sees about 8 of us. What would be the best route to bring him on board to create an actual clinic?
Well, I think you've already taken the first step, so we will note the name down, and we can contact them and start conversing with them about it.
Thank you. Let's see. Is there any reason why I can exercise in the morning and be less breathless than when I try to exercise in the evening?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have a good, perfect, great, or satisfactory answer for this. It may be as simple as just that you are well rested in the morning and not later in the day, in terms of this sort of a diurnal variation in LAM is seen in patients who have lymphatic complications, where throughout the day with more lymph flow as you're eating, you can have increase in the lymphangiolia myoma size perhaps. I'm not sure how that would translate to a difference in exercise capacity though. And so, yeah, sorry, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for it.
Thanks, Olivier. Another question related to LAM Clinic. Okay, so I'm less than a year into my diagnosis. I am followed by a pulmonologist who is local to me and made my initial diagnosis. I did go to the LAM Clinic at the onset of my diagnosis, but cannot go all the time because of insurance reasons. I'm still at 100% lung function. Is maintaining supervision with my current pulmonologist, I guess, enough for now?
It appears so, really. And again, I just want to reiterate, just because I presented the common care models that are employed by different patients, that they don't necessarily need to be the rule that everyone has to follow. Really, everybody's care model will have to fit their individual needs. You may, if it works, want to inquire with the LAM clinic or the insurance. If a telehealth model might work, perhaps you could check in with your LAM clinic once a year or so to make sure everything is still done. And of course, as I said, you could reach out to us at the foundation or make use of the resources. But based on what I understand for your situation, it seems the best course of action is just make sure that your lung function is closely monitored and followed.
Another interesting question about vaccination. I've never had the flu, and I've known people who got the flu after a flu shot. Now that I have LAM and with COVID here, is there anything you can share to help me feel more comfortable getting vaccines, such as flu, COVID vaccine, shingles specifically?
Yeah. We hear this a lot where patients feel that they got the flu from the flu shot. Really, the flu vaccine is a killed vaccine. So the virus in that vaccine is not live. So you may have some after effects from the vaccine where you may feel malaise, you may have local pain, headache and stuff, but that's different. You don't actually get the flu from the flu vaccine. And the same is going to hold true for the COVID vaccine. These are not live vaccines. So you may have some after effects of the vaccine, but that is not the same as you getting COVID-19. And the only thing to keep in mind with vaccinations in general, since we are on this topic, is you want to make sure that you're not getting vaccinated with a live vaccine. And just confirm that with your pharmacist if you're unsure about it before you get the vaccine.
Thank you. Let's see. All right. Back on the COVID. Great news to hear LAM patients survive COVID. That being said, I assume this patient had mild LAM versus severe LAM. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, all over the disease spectrum. I was just speaking to a patient with the lung function in the 20 to 30% range on supplemental oxygen who just got diagnosed with COVID this morning. And she is doing well and able to recover at home. I'm aware of another couple of patients with severe lung disease on supplemental oxygen who have recovered well. So this spans the spectrum.
Thank you. Another about vaccination. Can LAM patients after being vaccinated be around their family friends who do not choose to get the vaccine?
I would say keep exercising the same precautions for COVID-19 at least through the winter.
Yeah, thank you. Another question, which is not related to COVID. Costochondritis. Is this common with LAM patients? I've had severe chest pain for almost 2 months now. X-ray did not show pneumo.
Yeah, so for the folks on the call who may not know about it, costochondritis is really inflammation of the cartilage, typically manifests as pain in the center of your chest. I'm not aware of any relationship between LAM and costochondritis. Now, costochondritis most commonly is a result of a viral infection, so it may be a situation where it needs to just bide its time and go away. The other common things which could give you a pain that may look like costochondritis is if you have something like acid reflux or heartburn. And just think about that as well.
Okay, back to COVID. Just like I guess a testimony. I have mild LAM, lung function in normal range, and I survived COVID. It was not fun though. Get the vaccine. I plan on getting it still. Just a testimony. Something about trials. Are there any findings from the RESULT trial yet?
Yeah, so this is again for folks who don't know. RESULT was the phase 2 trial where we gave open label resveratrol to 25 LAM patients who were already on sirolimus. Update from the study is that we have finished recruitment. All study patients have finished all their study visits. And now where the study stands is for me to find some time to analyze the data. And I will do my best to try to get to it within this month or so, but I won't promise that.
Thank you. Okay, question about transplant. When is it time to get listed for transplant? Does a LAM patient have to stop taking sirolimus?
This is a difficult question. We grapple with this a lot. So just to take a step back, the reason this question comes up is that there is a black box warning for sirolimus where cases of bronchial dehiscence, which means that the tube or your airway where the transplanted lung is connected to your airways, that airway gives way, which, as you can imagine, is a very dire situation for a post-transplant patient. And that has been reported to happen with sirolimus. However, the dehiscence or this episode typically happens 6 to 8 weeks after surgery. So if you think of it this way, if you stop your sirolimus just prior to surgery, all of your sirolimus would be washed out of your system well before the timing for this bronchial dehiscence. So it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of logical sense that you should have to stop your sirolimus at the time of listing. The worry there obviously being that you could have a precipitous decline in lung function. But every transplant center adopts different policies regarding this. So it is worth discussing this with your transplant team very carefully. It is also worth having your transplant team talk to your local LAM clinic provider so that they can have a very nuanced discussion about this topic. Some other strategies that other clinics can employ is switching the sirolimus to everolimus, because everolimus has a shorter half-life than sirolimus. So that may give more comfort and more peace of mind to your transplant team. So that's something else to think about.
Thank you very much. Another question about sirolimus. Is there a typical time frame to see improvement in a chylothorax being treated with sirolimus?
Yeah, so chylothorax or all chylus complications in LAM respond very well to sirolimus. And is per our guidelines also the recommended first line treatment. Regarding time frame, for some patients the response happens rather quickly, meaning in the matter of weeks, but there are a few patients where response time takes a while, and a while meaning months, even 6 to 12 months. So there is no typical time frame, but if possible, we typically like to give it time.
Thank you. And there was another question about a clarification about vaccination. I'm not sure I understood correctly. Did you say that those of us on LAMposium should get the Shingrix shot once a year, the flu shot once a year, and pneumonia shot just once?
Partially correct. You should get the flu shot every year. Shingrix is one-time immunization, but that one-time immunization involves 2 shots. So you get a shot now, and then a booster shot 2 to 6 months after the first one. And the pneumonia vaccine, the Prevnar, is a one-time vaccine, and Pneumovax is something you get renewed every 5 years.
Thank you. A question about specific issue. Have you seen other LAM patients with Mycobacterium avium intracellularly? This was suggested for my CT scan, and I believe this patient got got that CT scan yesterday. So basically, she said, I had my second CT of the chest. My LAM has mildly progressed. However, the usual finding was 3 in-bud opacities in both lower lobes, which suggests an underlying atypical infection, such as Mycobacterium avium intracellular. Have you seen this in other LAM patients?
Yeah, so the finding of 3 in-bud opacities in the lower lobes is actually a rather common and non-specific finding on CT scans. Even outside of LAM, this is something that commonly comes up. There is really no relationship of this finding to LAM per se. And it is not as simple as a 3 in-bud equals Mycobacterium infection. Mycobacterial infection is one of the things we think about when you have 3 in-bud opacities. Other things we think about are there any other fungal infections? Other things we think about are any other viral infection, and perhaps the most common thing that causes this is if you have acid reflux or you have aspiration. And so not knowing the individual specifics, I can't comment to which one of these etiologies it is, but we need to think about all of these things and not just Mycobacterium.
Thank you.
Patty?
Yeah?
This is Shar. I'm going to jump in. I'm just looking at the clock. It's 8:30.
Yep.
Dr. Gupta, thank you very much. Maybe we take one, maybe two questions, depending on length of answers, and we let Dr. Gupta relax for the rest
Sure.
of the evening, and we'll move into our group discussion.
A quick one, maybe not so quick. Why do we need to avoid live vaccines?
Yeah, the concern with live vaccines, or let's take a step back. A live vaccine means that the vaccine contains a weakened form of the actual bug that we are trying to get you immunized against. And it may not necessarily be a concern for LAM patients who are not on immune suppression, but if you're on immune suppression, such as sirolimus, even that weakened bug could be enough to give you infection. And that is why we suggest that you avoid live vaccines.
Thank you. So one last one. I'm newly diagnosed. I'm going to Boston on the 16th to get testing for my first mild visit. Will I have to get the shingles vaccine before enrolling in the trial in case I get the actual drug and not the placebo?
Yeah, there is no such rule that you have to have the shingles vaccine prior to enrolling in mild. You're certainly more than welcome to get your shingles vaccine prior to enrolling. You could even get it during the trial if you wish. But yeah, those events can move independently. They don't need to be related.
Okay, so Shar, I guess I'm pretty sure we have answered all the questions. Maybe there might be a few that weren't, but we could, you could follow up with the foundation, and we'll be able to get the answers for you.
Yes, definitely. We will preserve the chat box, and so there are a couple questions in there that we didn't have a chance to get to, but we will make certain that we follow up with you by the end of the week on those. So, Dr. Gupta, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. There's a lot of questions and fantastic information in the presentation. I appreciate your time very much this evening.
Thank you, Shar.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And for everyone